Bryan Cranston is an anomaly. Generally, when we think of the most talented dramatic actors, we put them in a different category to comedic actors. Yes, dramatic actors can be funny and comedy actors can do drama, but at the very highest of heights, they tend to only excel at one and be proficient in the other. Whereas Cranston defies those rules. The same man who scooped up 4 Emmys for his electrifying performance as Walter White made us cry with laughter as Hal in Malcolm in the Middle, earning him 3 Best Comedy Actor Emmy nominations. Although his dark turn in Breaking Bad has somewhat overshadowed his performance as Hal, I actually find both performances to be equally impressive, as they demand a huge level of commitment and skill to pull off. Cranston was literally born in Hollywood. His mother was a radio actress, and his father was a struggling actor, who abandoned the family when his son was 11 to pursue his dreams of becoming a star, dreams that never came to fruition. So when Bryan decided he too wanted to become an actor, rather than just chasing stardom, he honed his craft. He acted in commercials and popped up in small TV roles here and there before landing a small recurring role as a dentist in Seinfeld. But then Malcolm in the Middle came along, and it was now, at the age of 44, that he would first make a name for himself as a mainstream comedic talent. And although Lois was the dominating presence of the show, Cranston still found a way to make Hal the most entertaining.
So I started to think what would be a complementary characteristic for Hal would be perhaps the opposite of her. What is she lacking? She's fearless. So I'm fearful of everything.
So what is it about this performance that made it not just one of the funniest characters ever captured on television, but the perfect launchpad for Cranston's dramatic career? Let's take a deeper look at how Bryan Cranston perfected Hal in Malcolm in the Middle. We'll start with the key skill set that Cranston brings to the table: physical comedy. Bryan makes Hal a very active character. He's always in motion, picking things up, putting things on, constantly touching everything and fidgeting, which allows him to feel much more present in any scene he's in because he's physically engaging with all the props around him. And to make Hal a much more magnetic screen presence, Cranston uses these highly animated hand gestures throughout the series. This makes him come across as much more emotionally invested in anything he's saying, thinking, or doing. It also conveys that he's always fighting to be heard in any scene he's in, as although he is also a parent, in comparison to Lois, he possesses no real authority in his own home, making him feel more like the eldest child than a disciplinary figure. But Cranston doesn't just use his hand movements to stand out on a crowded stage. He uses them to find fun ways to communicate with the audience. For example, when he's yet to realize he's forgotten Lois's birthday, he lies in the bed next to her to console her, rubbing his finger gently around her shoulder. Then when she mentions that it's her birthday, notice the shift. It's as if his brain has stopped like a deer in headlights, so his finger stops too. He widens his eyes and looks to Lois in fear, then uses her shoulder to post himself back up as he needs to find an immediate gift or he'll be in just as much trouble. Keep in mind, the audience don't technically know that Hal's forgotten her birthday yet, but Bryan's physical reaction, using his hand in tandem with his eyes, is telling us everything we need to know. Then when Craig arrives at the front door with a beautifully wrapped gift that he can pass off as his own, again, Cranston uses his hands as an extension of his character's thought process, by rubbing the box up and down, as if the present is a welcome guest to the house that he's going to treat well. These are subtle creative choices that make the whole scene much more layered. He's letting us under the character's skin so we know what he's thinking and feeling without needing to say a word.
You know, some people say, well, to really see classic comedy, you need to look back at Chaplin, or you need to look at Laurel and Hardy. I think, yes, definitely true, but you see it all over the place. You just have to be looking for it. There are people that can do it. That character is one of the funniest characters in television, I think.
Cranston is an unexpected master of physical comedy. He's just willing to go there, and throws himself into whatever the script demands, no matter how silly it makes him look. In fact, the sillier the better. He often releases these wild, exaggerated tornadoes of movement that you can't take your eyes off. So much so that you can completely remove the audio from these scenes and they still play out perfectly. Honestly, just watch this sequence and tell me it's not up there with a Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin level silent film. Over the course of the show, the writers clearly develop an understanding of Cranston's abilities and start catering to it. So when he steals a gift for Lois, they have him comedically run away with his hilarious run and then sprint up the wrong side of an escalator to squeeze every last drop of comedy gold out of him, knowing that the actor will fully commit to the silliest, most over-the-top physicality, no questions asked. Akin to Rowan Atkinson's Mr. Bean, there's even an episode where Hal gets into an ongoing feud with a bee. There are very few actors in the world that could pull this off, as yes, anyone could do it or try it, but for it to actually be funny is a whole other level. As in both cases, the writers need total trust in their performer, as they completely dictate the action and the audience's knowledge of where the bee even is based on their spontaneous delivery. Bryan clearly understands that film storytelling needs to play on two levels, what we can see and what we can hear. So he always ensures that his performance works on both levels independently, and even better when paired together. This leads directly into the second key, vocal comedy. Perhaps learned from his mother's radio acting, Cranston has pitch-perfect delivery, sometimes sounding like he's a sports radio announcer.
You know, you were named after Rusty Malcolm.
I was?
Yes, sirree, Bob.
And other times delivering the silliest of lines with a deranged level of sincerity.
This ends now.
Get ready, boys. It's time to put out the bats.
Bryan believes that in order for any performance to make the audience laugh, the actor has to play it straight and not find what they're doing funny, as otherwise you take the responsibility to laugh away from the viewer as you're essentially doing it for them. But given he plays Hal as someone who's highly sensitive and frightened of everything, it's only right that he gives him his own personalised yelp that makes every scene far funnier. These high-pitched whimpering shrieks for help are so cartoonishly comedic that you can easily compare them to another famous TV dad.
Hello!
Despite his otherwise deep, gravelly voice, Cranston actually has a uniquely high vocal range that allows him to squeak out his dialogue as his character gets more desperate. Like when he discovers his sons have been stealing donated goods from the local church.
Is that cheese? Oh, I need to sit.
This ability to separate his physical performance from his vocal delivery allows the writers to create more unique sequences that just couldn't work with a lesser actor. For instance, when Lois goes out for the night and Hal is left in charge, Cranston narrates his character's conflicted thoughts and then separately acts out his physical reactions to them.
And then she'll feel like we can't be trusted on our own. She'll never want to have a night out again, and it'll all be my fault.
And the final key to this performance is emotional expression. Bryan Cranston has an abnormal level of control over his face, which allows him to take the audience on an emotional journey with his character beat by beat. We've seen him do this both dramatically and subtly in Breaking Bad. But in order to make his delivery as Hal more comedic, he ramps up the childlike levels of vulnerability and leans into more exaggerated expressions. So that even by just seeing a screenshot of this performance, you can instantly tell that it's a comedy. One of Bryan's favourite acting tools is his lip quiver, which he can release on command. He uses this to communicate fear, pain, or disappointment. He's so expressive with his face that he's essentially a walking emoji. If we look at the scene at the bus station when he plans to run away with the boys to evade punishment, he calls Lois from a payphone to tell her why he's fleeing, and by just reminding him that he loves her too much to run away, his face instantly tells us that he's going to cave.
That may be true.
So let's just look at what he's doing here. He stares into the abyss of his own mind, as if he had never factored in how much he would miss her, and he's hating the vision of loneliness playing out in his imagination. While he's doing that, he slowly releases the grip on his mouth, so it drags his expression down. So we can see this new burden is weighing on him. Then his eyes roll and flicker as he grapples with the thought, struggling. He tries to hold strong by yet again using his hand, by lifting this one finger up as if he's objecting to the thought. Despite his vulnerability, he is reminding himself to push through. But once Lois presses harder with a simple, "Do you have any idea how much you'd miss me?" Bryan shows his character crumbling with a high-pitched acceptance.
Yes, I have some idea.
And then he brings his hand into play, gently caressing the phone box with affection. This little detail is really showing us what's on Hal's mind. He's acting out what he would be missing. His love would be gone with no one to comfort him. Cranston makes this look far easier than it is. You need to be so emotionally available to let the emotion pour out like this, but also have already considered what tools you can use in the frame of each shot to communicate with the viewer. Think about it. In a close-up, if his hand is by the phone and the phone is by his ear, then outside of his face, only the fingers can be used. And if we're in a mid-shot, then he can use his finger lower down and turn away from the boys to physically demonstrate he's betraying them. When Hal has to make the tough decision of whether or not to pull the plug on his neighbour, Bryan is assigned the responsibility of expressing both sides of the argument using his body as an instrument. Let's see how he does it without needing to speak, but just listening to the other two characters' opinions and embodying each of them. He starts off by nervously fidgeting with his fingers, showing us that Hal is wrestling with his thoughts, unsure what to do. Meanwhile, his face reacts to everything she's saying, as she argues how much the patient must be suffering, just lying there, waiting to be put out of his misery. We can see the emotions course through his eyebrows and lip, causing them to bubble with agony before his face folds into a devastated mess. Then in comes the other actor, arguing look at how hard he's fighting, how much he wants to live. And Bryan's face instantly molds into this proud smile, like he's an inspiration to observe and he won't let him down. The complete opposite of what he was expressing 5 seconds ago. It's almost like he's doing improv. At the click of a finger, he has to jump from one emotion to the next with equal levels of enthusiasm and without even flinching. To say Hal wears his heart on his sleeve is an understatement. He's just pure emotion all the time. Everything is right on the surface, ready to explode. Like when he falls asleep, waiting for that speeding car to drive by so he can tail him. Once he wakes up from the sound of the passing engine, Bryan launches straight into action, the panic jittering through his entire body as he searches for his keys. Then with his fingers, he keeps that momentum going by frantically fiddling. But once the key snaps in the ignition, crushing his character's dreams, Cranston releases what can only be described as one of the funniest TV meltdowns ever recorded, fueled by a mixture of devastation and boiling rage. There are just no half measures when it comes to Bryan Cranston's performance. If he's going to go for something, he goes all in, always prioritizing the audience's entertainment ahead of his own vanity. As there's nothing flattering about this performance, he's a frightened, fidgeting, childish meltdown of a man in almost every moment he's on screen. But the results are undeniably hilarious. It's impossible to know what any other actor would have done with this character, as the writers clearly adapted to Cranston's unusual skill set as the show progressed. But I can't imagine anyone else combining such animated physicality with such emotional vulnerability, and still somehow being believable. He brings this zany energy to the role that can only really be compared to cartoon characters. So although he has proven himself to be one of, if not the best dramatic actor in television history, lest we not forget that for a full 7 seasons of Malcolm in the Middle, he was also revealed to be a total master of physical comedy too, making him one of the most versatile performers you're likely to ever witness. Well, if you've made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now give the video a like, possibly even leave a comment and click on that subscribe button, it will encourage that mysterious algorithm to do its thing.